Hi, my name is Annette Fletcher, and I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. We're going to be sharing the mission and the goals of Peace Corps. The mission of Peace Corps is to promote world peace and friendship by fulfilling three goals. One, to help people of interested countries in meeting their need for trained men and women. Two, to promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of the people served. And three, which this series is all about, is promoting a better understanding of other people on the part of Americans. So today we have Allegra Toriano, and she is going to be joining us today, and she is going to be fulfilling her third goal by sharing a little bit of her experience today. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
So could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Allegra Toriano, and I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Senegal in 1980 to 1982. And then I was on staff in Costa Rica as the TEFL advisor for the Inter-America Pacific region from 2010 to 2013. I lived in Costa Rica and worked in 8 countries. And then finally in 2013, they moved me out to Vanuatu to be the director of program and management.
That is awesome on so many levels, because Vanuatu is one of the places that for whatever reason I've been trying to get to. Their culture seems so rich. So you've already shared where you served. What were your programs in Senegal?
I was a TEFL high school teacher. So
Okay.
I taught, first year English, sixième, which is first year, cinquième, second year, quatrième was third year, and I had one of my 2 years, I had some troisième, which was your fourth year. So I had the whole gamut of high school, and it was quite interesting in 1980 because as you may imagine, going off to Africa was, without all the social media, without the telephones, without anything. It was, okay, bye mom, bye dad, I'll see you in 2 years. And, I wrote letters home on a weekly basis and numbered them. That was on aerograms. And I wrote them so small that just 2 years ago when my mom died at 100, I found a folder of all my letters.
Wow.
And I can barely read it because it's so small. Because, you were trying to fit it all in one aerogram. So I am planning on, at some point, transcribing this and then sending my letters off to the Library of Congress, because I know they collect, these kinds of things from RPCVs as part of their collection. But yeah, it was really an interesting experience. It basically did change my life in so many ways, because I went in there going, oh, I was a French major, so that's how I ended up in West Africa, because I spoke French. I had lived in southern France and had fallen in love with the woman in my dorms right next to me. She was a princess from Chad studying at the University of Aix-en-Provence with me. And I was so enamored with West African culture that I said, oh, I'm going to come and visit you. But in the meantime, Chad broke out in a war. So, this was 1976. I'm really going back. So in 1979, I was like, oh, I really don't want to go to graduate school. That was the plan, was to follow the family all in, they were all business, and, oh, I'll go do a degree in international business. And I really wasn't enjoying the whole idea, like accounting. And I was good at languages. So I saw a tear out for the Peace Corps, and I said, oh, they're still around. Even back then, people would be like, wow, they're still around. And so I filled it out, and the next thing I know, within a week, they called me and they said, how would you like to go to West Africa? And I said, sure, I have a map in my house. And they said, after going through all the interviews and stuff, they said, well, we're hoping to send you to Senegal. And I said, oh, I looked at the map and said, yeah, it's on the coast. I like this. And this was like February, and I got everything cleared and went in July. So funny enough, Annette, this is our 40th anniversary of our group, and we were supposed to have a reunion in Utah this September. There were 35 of us that we were going to get together for a long weekend and have a reunion, and of course that got postponed till next year. But
right,
like I said, it changed my life in so many ways, because after the 2 years, I realized, wow, I really like teaching English as a second language. So I came back to the United States and got my master's degree in second language acquisition, and I spent 40 years of my life in the career, and it was thanks to Peace Corps, because before that I was sort of fumbling, going, oh, I don't really want to teach French. I loved French, but not as a career.
right.
So yeah, it really did change my life. And I'm still in touch with a bunch of my students who are now grown adults with nearing adult children, and every once in a while I'll get a WhatsApp from one of them saying, oh, let's chat. So social media has really facilitated our ability to keep in touch with our people in our village, or, people all over the world, really. So that was the first part of Peace Corps. And then I was very active in my return group. So I'm in Milwaukee, and I was, from the time I got back to Milwaukee in 1986, I heard that there was a return group, and so I got very active with them, and then eventually became president of Milwaukee Peace Corps Association. And then after like 2 years, National Peace Corps Association pulled me onto their board. And one thing Peace Corps teaches you, and you realize just by doing this work, is you're always a volunteer. And I was raised, my family always raised us with the idea that volunteerism was really important in our lives. Like my dad would always constantly volunteer the family. We're doing this, we're doing that. So that was a really important part of that as well, because to be able to say, oh yeah, I'll go on your board. Oh, it's not paid, or, it's not a big deal, because that's what you do.
Yes.
And then, my daughter graduated from college in 2008. And my marriage was on the rocks, and I said, it's time for me to, and my business. So I was actually teaching English second language in a couple companies in the area. And, the economy was starting to trend downwards. And I knew that there was possibly the likelihood that I would end up with no work. And so I applied to the State Department's English Language Fellows Program and ended up in Colombia.
Nice.
And that really changed my life in a new direction, because I was always thinking I'll go back to Africa. I love West Africa. And before I know it, I was in Bogota, spent a year there, and I was going to go back for my second year when one of my friends, she was a country director in Honduras, Trudy, had come over with George Baldino to Colombia to set up the program, because they were just coming back into Colombia. And this was 2010, and they sort of latched on to me because they said, well, what do you, help us out? Because they knew that Peace Corps was really big for me. So I helped them in lots of different ways, and setting, making connections for them. And next thing I know is I'm on this island off the coast. It's actually Colombian territory called San Andres. And I was there for a summer program working for the State Department in 2010. And Trudy gives me a call and says, you really want this job? And I'm like, what job? I was planning on going back to Colombia. She said, oh, it's the first ever TEFL advisor for Peace Corps in the Inter-American Pacific region, and you speak Spanish, so they're going to really want you. And I'm like, okay. So I'm on this island, and the internet's really bad, and I'm trying to apply. And next thing I know, I have a series of interviews, and I came back to the United States to be a mentor for the new English language fellows going off around the world, right, in August. And on the last day, I got this email saying, Peace Corps is offering you this TEFL position, advisor position. I said, oh, okay. Next thing I know, I'm going through all the clearances, and they sent me back to Colombia as a consultant because they were starting their first training, the PST. And I'm in Colombia, and then I come back to the United States for overseas training. And, you know, I cleared, obviously, and then they sent me off to Costa Rica in November 2010, 10 years ago.
Wow.
So that was a really wonderful job, because it gave me the opportunity to see TEFL programs in 8 different countries and interacting with local staff, and also helping them with their programs, and also helping train volunteers. And to this day, I have many friends that were Peace Corps volunteers going through training at the time that we just stayed in contact with. 7 of those volunteers, and now sounds like a small number, but I'm really proud of them all, because of my urging, applied to the English Language Fellows Program and went after their Peace Corps experience into this program. And that changed their lives. In fact, one of my volunteers who I trained in Micronesia is now in Kazakhstan, married to a Kazakh woman. And, you know, so, you know, there's all those little linkages that we are all connected. So, you know, besides, you know, the third goal of coming home and teaching the world about our countries, I think it's also really important to continue sharing either our resources or our knowledge of, you know, of our countries where we served, of the peoples with whom we worked, languages, you know, whatever. I came really close to, like, my big failure, right? We all have failures. Was in 2005, I started up a nonprofit to eventually, my goal eventually was to open up, to build a school in the southern region of Senegal, where I served, in the Casamance. And I worked with a group of Senegalese here in Milwaukee. And our first big project was we collected 230 bikes and computers, and I was able to get a shipping container donated. Wow. And we loaded, over the weekend, loaded all those bikes, processed them, all the computers, some sewing machines, other stuff, and sent it off to Senegal. And it got there, and it got stuck in customs, and they started demanding all these bribes to get the money, you know, to pay for the customs, to get it out of customs. And I said to my Senegalese friends here, that can't do it. I said, one, all of the work that I spent doing this in the last year I was a volunteer. Number two, this was never a plan, was to have to pay to get it out of customs. So I considered that my one big failure was not being able to facilitate that. Somebody got some nice bikes, and
wow.
But, you know, I think it's really important to learn from that, because even as I was training volunteers and they were doing grant writing for projects, it was often, you know, don't discount the fact that this might fail in one way or another. And, you know, failure is good if you can grasp what you gained from those lessons learned. And for me, the lessons learned were, you can't always fight the forces out there that are, you know, going against you. So, yeah, so that's where I've been, and you know, I've had a great career thanks to Peace Corps. I've met the most amazing people thanks to Peace Corps. I don't think I would have had such a great career in my life. I would have probably been stuck in some corporate job somewhere, probably been a lot richer than I am now. But you know, it's not about money in the end, right? And you know, at the end of the day, I'm like, wow, I've lived in 8 countries. I've worked in these countries, and I have friends from all around the world, and it is because of my experience in Peace Corps. So.
That is awesome. It sounds like you developed the heart to serve while you were in Peace Corps. And most of the volunteers that I've encountered or that I've worked with have that heart of service. So most of the fields that they're in are still providing service. They're still a part of organizations like People to People, where they're volunteering or being voluntold and openly ready to provide those services. And you're right, it's not always about the money, but about being able to provide support, education, knowledge, and resources, which is something that I feel like most of us still do today, which is why we have so many volunteers who I think signed up to share their stories.
Well, and I think it's really also, you know, I loved your idea behind this, you know, first seeking out Peace Corps women because, you know, we've been a really vibrant part of this organization. Peace Corps never would have survived if it had only recruited men. I think women add a different perspective to village life, and also it opens a lot of people's eyes to potential, and the possibility that they can get further in life with an education and do things for themselves. Like I remember the first time I went back to Senegal, it was 7 years later. I was just dying to go. And I had my daughter was, you know, pretty young at the time, and I convinced my husband to let me go. I just have to go. It was just this, you know, I'm just dying to go over and see everybody. And I was walking down one of the paths in the village, and two young adults came up to me, and I didn't recognize them, you know, 7 years later. And they said, "Don't you remember us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I had, you know, 100 students." And they told me their names. I was, "Oh yeah, I remember you." They said, "We went up to the university and studied English because of you." And I literally, it brought me to tears. And this was, you have to think back to the 80s when English was not, I mean, you know, you're in a lingua franca, you're in a French, West African country where English, you know, I came back going, did I make any impact? Like, an English teacher in French West Africa, what kind of impact that is? Well, you know, 30 years later or 25 years later, when the internet explodes and English becomes that common language, it made sense. And now everybody's wanting to learn English. Even countries like Rwanda that decided to make English their first, you know, their second language rather than French, had a lot, you know, really says a lot about the importance of the language today. I mean, had I, you know, looking back 40 years ago, I would have said, oh, you know, it was I gained the most from this experience. It wasn't, you know, as maybe important to their lives because most of the kids were not necessarily going on past high school. But the ones that did, and the ones that did become English teachers, really saw a perspective of teaching language that wasn't necessarily created around the curriculum or the books that we were using.
Right.
You know, I remember the one day, this is a funny story, that Bob Marley died, and all my boys came to my house and they said, "Can you just bring your," you know, I had a little cassette player with a couple of Bob Marley cassettes, and they said, "Can you just, we're just so heartbroken." And I said, "Bob Marley, oh yeah, let's, I said, I can't let you guys go, you know, I mean, we have to have class." So in as basic of English as possible, I explained Bob Marley, what his life stood for. And then I said, if you guys are all really good, because 60 students in a class is pretty wild, right? Yeah. And I said, I will give you a little bit of a lecture about Bob Marley. We'll talk a little bit about, have some discussion, and then we'll dance. And that was, you know, that 7 years later, one of the students said, you know, that was the best class we ever had, that we got to dance in the class. Well, they were all dancers anyway, but we got to dance to Bob Marley, you know, that it was something that, you know, they never thought would be possible, a possible way to learn a language, you know, through music or through song and through drama. I did dramatization back then, and they just thought at first I was crazy, but I said, how else am I going to connect with you? Rather than, you know, group work, pair work in the 80s, none of that was methodology for teaching a language. Yeah. But yeah, it was pretty much a rock and roll ride through those 2 years, because, you know, we didn't have the same amount of communication, and you know, we did depend on each other, you know, the volunteer cohorts in our region, and friends, and you know, we got together when we could, but it was, I think, in some ways a lot harder, but then in a lot of ways it maybe exemplified what the Peace Corps service was about. You weren't all connected to the rest of the world. You know, you had to focus on the village and the people in the village, and you couldn't just up and take off. I mean, you could, but there was maybe less. Peace Corps had it was less likely that they were checking up on you. You know, today, you know, with all the safety and security,
yeah.
You can't just leave the village. Well, we were all moving around all the time and visiting people and, you know, doing things because, you know, because we could, and there wasn't, as long as we were doing our jobs, nobody was going to come down on us and say, you can't do that. But
right.
And where did you serve?
I was in Namibia.
Oh, good.
This is my little Peace Corps corner of resources and information.
And what program were you in?
In the PACE program. So PACE was Parent and Community Education.
Okay.
So you were talking about projects and initiatives that fail. The village that I served in was called Okumbahe. And in Okumbahe, there was a binder like this thick of initiatives that volunteers had tried or attempted, that some failed, some worked. And it was like, but that is cool, because what worked for one volunteer may have worked for another volunteer because of the engagement, because of the level of language, because of how they engaged with their neighbors, or if they were staying with the family. Like, all of those things made a difference. So so we don't want to get into my service, but in Namibia, I had the honor of actually living with another Peace Corps volunteer. So John was at the secondary school, and I was basically based at the preschool. So some of the projects that I tried, he was like, I tried that and I got nothing. And I was like, well, let's work on this one together. And he was like, cool, like, let's do it. So the projects, you're right. Like, you can't sit and stew in something that failed, or you may have to recreate it. That's what happened with a number of my projects. So we start a project because initially, you know, you're trying to do an assessment, but you have a bit of the language, but you don't know the language. At least I didn't know the language. So trying to figure out what was going to work and who was going to participate and who was going to be your counterpart in this initiative was like kind of layers of trying to figure things out. By the time you figure things out in that first year, you're like on and pumping, and you're like, yes, this project is moving now. And then you're like, what do you mean it's time to go? No. I got work to do. Like, I got more stuff to, okay. And you're just hoping and praying that you and your counterpart like worked well enough together that those initiatives were able to be sustainable when you left.
And we didn't have counterparts. There was another English teacher in my high school, but he was, in the beginning, I think, so fearful of talking to me because he was so self-conscious about his English that I don't think he spoke 5 words to me the whole 2 years. I had tried to reach out to him, but he really put up this wall. So I became good friends with the French teacher, with a math teacher, with a Phi Ed teacher. And I just thought, you know, he's losing out. This is his opportunity where we could have actually collaborated. But I think sometimes you just can't push something that isn't meant to be. And I know that I had good enough relationship with my school administration and the teachers and other teachers that I just thought, you know, I can't battle this. I don't know if it's a gender thing. I don't know if it was because his English was weak, and they often sent weaker teachers out to the further regions. And my high school was the smallest high school in the country, so it was considered to be rather, I want to say, hickish, or, you know, in the country, basically. Yes. That's where I wanted to be. I didn't want to be in the city. When they were picking sites, I told Sue Rosenfeld, I don't know if her name's come up before, but she was our TEFL trainer. I said, I want to be as far away from Dakar as possible because I want to be in the most rural, because that to me was what a volunteer position should be about, rather than living, you know, a life in the city. I mean, I'm a city girl, but I really wanted to have the rural experience, and it paid off. I mean, I loved where I was, and I think that mattered too, is if you have a good, I didn't have to live with a family, I lived on my own. I did have a family, and I went and ate lunch with them every day, sometimes dinner. I'd bake for them. I had, you know, a little stove and oven, and when I'd get things that I could actually cull together to bake. You know, they love my chocolate brownies, and, you know, and it was those kinds of experiences that even when I went back, I've gone back 4 times, that they would constantly talk about. They would talk about, oh, did you bring brownies this time? Or a friend had come to visit and brought 10 pounds of popcorn between my mom unloading on him and he, you know, that was really the only thing I really cared about. So we'd have popcorn nights on Friday nights, you know, this was my last year. And then we'd sit around the fire and have popcorn and tell stories. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff they remembered. I wrestled with the girls in the village against the other villages at the end of the harvest. And this was a real famous thing to do, but only in my region did they allow the girls to wrestle. And nowhere else in Senegal did any of the girls wrestle. And I said, my second year, I said, I want to do that. And they got me all dressed up and they kept saying, no, my African name was Salimata Sane. They said, Salimata, you can't wrestle because you're too weak, because, you know, you don't do any physical labor. And they didn't do the big pounding, you know. And I said, yeah, I know, but, you know, I think I'm okay. What they didn't know was I had taken judo in college. So, you know, and I was very much a tomboy and had grown up with 2 brothers. So we were constantly wrestling and stuff. So they didn't know I had the strength in me. And I was waiting on the sidelines for one of the girls from the other villages to pick me to wrestle with. And nobody would come up to the alulumo, which is the white girl. And I'm like, no, I can't just sit this one out. And I said, well, I said to the girls in my school, I said, well, what do I do? They said, you go pick one. And no, because nobody would pick me. And I went and I pointed to one girl and she was like, no, I pointed to another girl. And then Elizabeth, the first girl that agreed to wrestle with me, gets up and she's this, you know, working in the rice fields and she's just this Amazon woman. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to pull one of my judo moves on her, and sure enough, within, you know, a matter of seconds, I flipped her. And there were villages of people there that were just like, it all erupted in this. And we had a king at the time, and he beckoned me over and gave me 100 CFA, which was equivalent to about 11 cents back then, you know. And this was, you know, his way of showing his pride. And all those 4 times that I went back, the guys in my village, you know, the chef and, you know, that all they would say would be, you were the one that wrestled, you know. And even in fact, the last time I went back and I went to visit the man who rented the house to me, Etienne, he said, we need to go out to see Elizabeth. I mean, she's expecting you. I'm like, no, she doesn't even know I'm here. But he said, no, she would want to see you. And you know, it was all that those little things that made the Peace Corps. It wasn't necessarily like, I remember going back and saying, you guys don't remember all the extra stuff I did as an English teacher and the English club I had and the games that we played. And they said, yeah, but it was the wrestling, it was the chocolate cake, the popcorn, the American things.
The personable and kind of, and what is it, like the little communications, the thoughtfulness,
the micro community, the micro actions that we did on a daily basis that we don't necessarily view as important, but in their minds, that was what made us special.
Yes.
But I'm sure you had many of those examples as well. But
you know, it was serving for the Peace Corps was one of the best decisions that I've made. I wish I would have taken more advantage of some of the opportunities, but I went to Japan after Peace Corps and did a completely different project.
To teach English, right?
Yes. Yes. So if you could leave, I guess if there are people that are interested in becoming a Peace Corps volunteer, what would you say to them if they have an interest in becoming a volunteer?
Well, I'd say be fat, flexible, adaptable, and tolerant. Okay, that was an acronym I got from the State Department. That wasn't something that
I like it.
Really important. Sorry, that's my daughter. I think it's real. Those three skills, if you want to call them such, or traits, flexible, adaptable, and tolerant, are really important in any overseas position that you might seek, whether it's with Peace Corps, whether it's going to Japan with JALT, whether it's this or that. You have to go into another culture and be open to vulnerability. And the other piece that I learned very early, which really has gotten me through all the work that I've ever done in any of those countries, was lower your expectations. And I think with those, with that in mind, you're going into a new country for the first time. You can't expect what, your preconceived notions, or people write blogs about what you're going to be expecting. You have to get rid of all that noise and really make it your own, but also be open to change and be open and be willing to embrace the experience, because it most likely will be the one experience in your life that changes you. You may halfway through say, this really isn't for me, but most people that finish Peace Corps come out of it saying, this experience changed my life in so many ways. Whether they go back and continue working with their country of service, or whether they choose an area in their profession that takes them back to, whether it's Africa or Asia or whatever, doesn't matter. But I think that ability to be flexible and adaptable and tolerant to whatever is going to come your way is going to really get you a lot farther than going in there with blinders on, or rose-colored glasses, as they say.
Yes.
It's going to be hard. I mean, Vanuatu is a perfect experience. A perfect example. A lot of our volunteers came there thinking, it's going to be absolutely wonderful being on South Pacific Island for 2 years because it's really beautiful. But the reality of getting to a village where your cell phone service doesn't necessarily work, and you can't get a hold of your friends because you're lonely, or because you can't, it's tough. And when you're expected to eat the same 3 or 4 things every single day, sometimes 3 times a day, it can be pretty tedious. And food is often a great source of comfort for people, but at the same time, it can be a great source of frustration.
Right. We had that too. Actually, that may be a topic, because I had a volunteer who was a vegetarian in Africa, and she lived with the family during her entire service, and that was a lot. But so thank you so much, Allegra, for sharing your service in Senegal, Costa Rica, and Vanuatu. It really does sound like you connected with all of your communities, and that you do have the heart for service. I love what you said about FAT. When you are interested in becoming a volunteer, it is imperative that you are FAT, flexible, adaptable, and tolerant. I think that is very important, and I will totally use that in the future. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.